Hello, everyone. I'm Bo from Brutal Commentary, and today I'm going to be breaking down our next matchup for UFC Vegas 113. In this matchup, we have Bruna Brasil taking on Ketlen Souza. So, in this matchup, you have a battle of strikers, and also a fight where pace and physicality are going to matter a lot. Like I said, both women like to strike and preferably keep the fight on the feet, but they go about it in very different ways. You have one in Bruna Brasil who is more about movement and picking her shots, and the other, Ketlen Souza, is about pressure and power. When you look at how these styles usually clash, it starts to feel like a fight where the more aggressive fighter can take control if she's willing to push the action. Now, quickly looking at their last five opponents. For Ketlen Souza, she is 2-3 in her last five. Her last fight was a loss to Karini Silva, where she got knee barred. That was on at least a nice 2-fight win streak. Beat Marnik Man, granted not that high level, and then got a really good win against Yasmin Howergy at UFC 306. Now, unfortunately, on a 2-fight skid, losing to Angela Hill last February via close decision in a fight you could argue Souza should have won, but still nonetheless close decision. And then lost to Piera Rodriguez in another split decision last August. So you look at Souza, right? She hasn't lost like dominantly to the point where you're like, oh man, can she recover? It's been close fights, but ones where it just seems she has not done enough. Meanwhile, for Bruna Brasil, she's 3-2 in her last five, trading wins and losses as of late, where she beat Shauna Bannon and then lost to Luma Lumbume. Beat Molly McCann, lost to Kong Wong. And then most recently, beat Ming Shai excuse me, in August. So you look at Bruna Brasil, at least of her wins, they're not the highest level. Like I said, Shauna Bannon is kind of, I wouldn't even say middle of the pack. Molly McCann's retired, and Mi Shang is a road to UFC fighter, with the Bruna Brasil fight being her first official UFC fight. And, road to UFC can produce some good talent, but, Ming Shang's yet to be seen. And also, that was just a very tough stylistic matchup for her. But still, I think this will be an interesting clash, and it'll definitely be interesting to see how their striking goes. But without further ado, let's get down to the breakdown. Starting with Bruna Brasil. She's a very mobile striker. She likes to move, stay light, and work at range. She'll throw kicks set up with punches, and then go back to before things get wild. Basically, what I mean is Bruna Brasil likes to throw kicks from range. Usually also sets up her punches, and usually get back to her stance and gets back to space before a counter or, like I said, some sort of wild brawl can ensue. Brasil, when she's able to keep space, she can look pretty smooth. The issue is that her style relies a lot on having room to operate. And when opponents get in her face and don't let her reset, Brasil can start looking uncomfortable. Plus, you also see it. Brasil kind of seems to get in her own head sometimes. I think she picks her shots so carefully that sometimes she's gun shy. And you kind of see it, like, say, with Kong Wang, who, while maybe was also a little hesitant, as that was the fight coming off the lost Gabriela Fernandez, you still saw Brasil really, like, just fight on the back foot, picking her shots a little too much, and just never really pressed the action. Meanwhile, Ketlen Souza, she's much more direct. Souza aggressive, throws with power, and she's not shy about walking forward. Souza wants to make the fight physical. And, she's happy to exchange, happy to pressure, and happy to turn things into a scrap. And, she's also stronger in close range, especially in clinch situations where Souza can bully opponents and keep them from getting away easily. I think, and obviously Souza's defense isn't perfect. She gets get tagged, but she makes up for it by constantly being offensive. And, Souza doesn't give opponents much time to get comfortable, which I think does play a big factor in the mental aspect, specifically, like I said, Bruna Brasil. As I said, sometimes she picks her shots and is a little too much, a little too passive. I think being the aggressor like Souza might play in Souza's favor. Now, just seeing how these styles clash. The fight really just comes down to whether Brasil can keep distance for the whole fight. Early on, you'll probably see her moving, throwing kicks, and trying to keep Souza at the end of her strikes. And, that's her best look. The The problem is that Souza's the type to keep coming no matter what. Obviously, if Souza, thinks a little too much, 2 losses, like what have I done wrong? And she fights a bit too passive, then she's gonna fight Bruna Brasil's game. But if it's the Ketlen Souza who's been fighting, like Angela Hill and Yasmin Haragi, then excuse me, then Souza, she'll eat a shot to give one back, and she'll keep closing the gap between until the fight gets tight, whether it's in the clinch or just close quarters. And once that happens, Brazil's movements become less effective, and Brazil's either going to back up towards the fence or get stuck trading in the pocket. And either of those favor Souza, as I think Souza's going to be the harder hitter. And in those exchanges, like I said, Souza's, the harder hitter, has more power and far more aggressive. Even if Brazil is landing, I think Souza's shots tend to look heavier and more damaging. And mentally, it's tough to deal with someone who's just going to keep walking down. That's what's been Brazil's problem. She just gets in her own head too much. You've seen it so many times. And even when she's not fighting an aggressive power puncher, and just fighting like tick for tack, like against, say, Luma Lubume, Brazil still gets in her own head and just does not fire much volume. So I think over time, I think the pressure starts to wear on Brazil. The resets get slower, the movements get a little messier, and Souza's confidence starts growing. So for my official prediction, I think Brazil has moments, especially early, where her movement and kicking game scores points. But as the fight goes on, it starts to tilt towards Souza. And I think Souza's pressure, strength, and willingness to trade should let her take over the bigger exchanges and control where the fight happens. Even if she gets hit, even if Souza gets hit, Souza keeps coming in forward, and that constant forward push makes it hard for Brazil to ever fully settle in. So my official prediction, I'm going with Ketlen Souza. I think in just simply pushing the pace, landing the harder shots, and controlling the fight in the pocket will most likely win her the fight. Probably most likely a decision. Bruna Brasil hasn't been finished in a while, if ever, really. Just looking at like her last, or in all of her losses, she's been KO'd before, so it is possible. But the last person to knock her out was Denise Gomes back in 2023. And, Denise Gomes is a very hard hitter. I don't know if Souza hits that hard, but it could happen. I'm not going to say it's out of the realm of possibility, but for the most likely pick, I'm going to go with Ketlen Souza, and I'm going to pick her via decision. But with that being said, that's been my breakdown of this matchup. If you enjoyed the video, like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below on who you think's going to win. But until then, I've been Bo from Brutal Commentary. I thank you all for listening. And remember, stay calm, stay respectful, and enjoy the violence. I'll see y'all next time.